Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... This weekend, I have returned to my recommended TBR pile from last year. And this is going to be one of those kind of reviews where no matter how deeply I dive, I'm still going to feel like I'm not doing the book any justice. However, I'm going to put my best foot forward and review The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot, which this was recommended to me by Heather M.G. Also, before I get started, I would like to note that I buddy read this with my good online friend Gina, who is now also known as Hanny. And to be honest, between the texts that Hanny and I sent back and forth to one another regarding this book, our texts probably equal out to the length of what a novella would be. And that's mainly because this book was so damned heavy. And every time we thought we knew what direction it was going in, Talbot threw a curveball that made us just think WTF. Not to mention the open ending that was extremely frightening and unsettling. But anywho, I would just like to thank Heather MG for recommending this to me. I would like to thank Hanny for reading it with me. And if either of you are watching, I hope you enjoyed this review. But without further ado, let's go back in time to the Victorian era and learn the truth about vampires. The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot opens up in 1856 and introduces the narrator named John Gladstone, who at the age of 7 believed he had seen an angel. Years later, after John grows into an adult, he inherits his father's house, goes to medical school, and marries a lady by the name of Camille. Then, as the years pass, he and Camille birth 2 daughters together. However, when Camille gives birth to their second daughter, who is also named Camille, she passes away due to having an influenza that currently has the world suffering through a pandemic. Following the death of his wife, John pursues trying to create a cure for the influenza. But as other doctors around him believe they have the answer, before their work is made public, they go insane, destroy their research, then kill themselves. Still, nonetheless, John pursues his research and believes he has come across a solution that could change the world. However, in the wrong hands, his discovery could be extremely devastating. Then, before he can advance any further, John becomes preoccupied by a young boy named Niccolo who had one evening stepped out in front of his carriage. And to John's surprise, he recognizes Niccolo as being the angel from his childhood. But soon, he comes to learn that Niccolo is not an angel. Instead, he's actually a vampire who needs refuge from the general public. And since John has become fascinated, he takes Niccolo into his home. Shortly thereafter, John is forced to put his hard work on the back burner because he comes home one day to discover his youngest special needs daughter has been kidnapped by Niccolo and a vampire elder named Lodovico. Also, once this tragedy hits the paper, he's confronted by a woman named Lady Dunaway who explains that she has suffered the same loss as himself. From here, the two join hands and go on a journey to rescue their children. But after starting this journey, John discovers that the vampires aren't just focused on their children. Instead, the vampires also want to prevent him from sharing his medical discovery with the world. The Delicate Dependency was published by Avon Books in 1982 and was Michael Talbot's first horror novel. Publishers Weekly called The Delicate Dependency ambitious, impressive, and unflaggingly interesting. And in 1992, long after this classic went out of print, Fangoria named The Delicate Dependency as one of its top 10 vampire novels. Not until 2014, when Valancourt Books resurrected this classic, it had not been previously reprinted. In the novel, when John first sees Niccolo, he identifies him as the angel who was painted in Da Vinci's Virgin of the Rocks, also known as Madonna of the Rocks. Two versions of the painting exist, where one is located in Paris and the other is located in London. The painting was commissioned in 1483, but wasn't completed to the confraternity's satisfaction until 1508. Fun facts! Here's some things you might not know about Michael Talbot. Michael Talbot was an openly gay author who not only wrote fiction, but nonfiction. Aside from his horror books, The Delicate Dependency, The Bog, and Night Things, his nonfiction works include books that highlight parallels between ancient mysticism, quantum mechanics, and reincarnation, which among those, his book The Holographic Universe is the most discussed. Unfortunately, Talbot passed away in 1992 at the age of 38 from leukemia. Now that that's covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler section, which, if you haven't read this book before, I'm about to reveal some things that could ruin the experience for you. So, if you would like to click away, just scroll down to the comments and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top with a timestamp in it. Once you click on this timestamp, it will direct you away from the spoilers and bring you to the thoughts section. Now, you only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go! Since everyone's had the opportunity to click away, I would like to talk about a few of my favorite moments. First up is the scene when John and Lady Dunway are captured by the vampire named Desessant. Now, prior to this, John and Lady Dunway reasoned that they need to try to find the house that has the highest gas bill because since vampires are believed to be nocturnal, this will lead them to whatever house stays up all night. And by doing this, they do land a suspect, which they follow this suspect to a mansion that belongs to Desessant. Then, after they arrive at that location, they're staying outside and thinking that they need to get in, but they don't exactly know how. And lo and behold, they have the golden opportunity that is just landed right before them. So they go into the mansion, and as they're looking around and everything, they get captured by Desessant. And even though he explains that he doesn't intend to hurt them, he also says that he can't let them go for fear of what they'll tell other people about him and other vampires. So for this reason, they become his prisoners, and he takes them to this vaulted dungeon in the basement of his home, where they are then kept guard by a trained falcon that's ready to rip them apart if they try to escape. I honestly did not see this coming, and once John and Lady Dunway were captured, all I could think was, what the hell is going to happen next? How can they get out of this? Like, there's just honestly no way that I could think of for them to escape this place. And I was kind of wondering, I'm like, wow, did the author write himself into a corner? But I knew that he didn't because there was so much more left to this book. Also, by how the monkish vampire was described, as well as the trained falcon and the dungeon, this really truly painted some awesome gothic imagery for me. And I loved how it all just blended together. It reminded me of like some old Vincent Price or like Boris Karloff horror movie, like how those were filmed where they just kind of seemed gritty and kind of slapped together, almost like a stage play in a sense. But I just really loved how all of this came together with its imagery. Aside from that, I was really happy to gain some backstory on the vampires while John and Lady Dunway had been captured. Like, for example, we discover that the vampires were the original Freemasons. They were also the original Illuminati. And here's the main kicker for me. They had actually built, well, I'm still kind of just laughing about it, just thinking about it, but they had actually built Notre Dame Cathedral. So, yeah, that was a really cool and fun concept. Plus, I absolutely loved the whole escape scene when John and Lady Dunway were able to escape the mansion during a vampire ball. And this really satisfied my curiosity on what a vampire ball might actually be like. My next favorite moment was Lady Dunway's grand reveal, which, leading up to this, John and Lady Dunway were able to escape Desessant's mansion, and she admits to him that she never had a child that was ever abducted from her. And then she says that she's actually a part of a vampire hunters organization, and had she told him this in the first place, he would not have believed her. However, that's not the kicker, because after they return to John's home base to rescue the cure from his rival Dr. Hardwick, they go back to Italy to find his missing daughter. And after a pretty kick-ass chase scene, they eventually wind up in this village at daybreak. And this is when John discovers that not only does sunlight not bother vampires, but Lady Dunway is actually a vampire herself, and she has been leading him on this wild goose chase that plays into their master plan of him destroying his work and research. But also, Lady Dunway isn't just any vampire. No, she is actually the legendary Lodovico who we have been hearing about since the beginning of the book. After this happened, I did not trust anyone or anything in this book. Like, I would not have been surprised if Ursula would have stepped out at any moment and revealed that she gave all of John's hard work away to the vampires because they promised she could keep whatever she could carry from Desessant's mansion, which, thankfully, that was not the case. And the thing is, everything was so detailed and believable that I did not realize it was going to get to this level of me having trust issues, because I fell for it. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And I should have seen it coming, because with Lady Dunway, when she lied to John to start with about having a kid and all of that, that should have been a red flag for me. But I didn't think it was going to go any further. I truly thought she was really a vampire hunter and not actually Lodovico. So it blew my mind. It truly did, and I really had to sit and contemplate that you really cannot trust anyone. Like, as believable as what someone might be, you just can't trust them. And that's a really frightening idea. My final favorite moment was the ending. Now, as this plays out, Lodovico explains to John that John won and the game is over. Also, he explains they didn't kidnap Camille to hurt her, but they did it so they could buy themselves some time and distract John from his research. And as they had this whole elaborate game that played out through the entirety of the book, they had hoped that their actions would have coerced John into going insane and destroying his research like those before him. And Lodovico adds that he wants John to destroy the cure and not release it to the world, because people are blind and they will use this cure for destructive purposes. Then, to prove a point, Lodovico takes the vial that has the cure in it and hands it over to Camille. And seeing the danger that she's in, John yanks the vial away from her before she can drink it and hurt herself. Which, this is when Lodovico explains what John just did to protect his daughter. This is what they're trying to do for humans, where humans will not hurt themselves or others. But since free will seems to be a thing here, Lodovico allows him to keep the vial with the cure and explains that John now holds the trump card to destiny, and it's all up to him. This was a really cool open ending, as we really don't know if John shared his cure with the world or if he destroyed all of his work. And to me, not knowing is really frightening because while John could share the cure and it could help people, it could also be very devastating in the wrong hands, which for one person to have that much power and even that much temptation is very unsettling to start with. But since this book had groomed me into trusting nobody, I really am on the fence in regards to John's future actions, simply because I had been so manipulated, I can't fully trust that he did the right thing. And even though this concept didn't scare me to the point where I needed to sleep with lights on or anything like that, the whole idea of this circumstance made me realize how insignificant the general public is in regards to there being a possible germ warfare or a deadly virus. I would like to take this opportunity to bitch about Dr. Hardwick, because out of everyone in this book, he truly was a real bastard. Like, for starters, he acts all buddy-buddy with John, and even takes John under his wing as an assistant. But while John is busting his ass, Dr. Hardwick is off trying to roll in the hay with Camille. Then, after John's daughter Ursula grows up, Hardwick earns her trust even though her father explains to her, "Do not trust this son of a bitch." Well, lo and behold, she really believes the old fart isn't going to two-time her. Then, after Ursula goes to rescue her dad, guess what the little dipshit does? She leaves all of her father's hard work and research in Dr. Hardwick's hands, which is exactly what Dr. Hardwick wanted to start with. And when she tells this to John, I almost shit myself. And had I been John and she told me this, my teeth would have shattered from the grimace I would have had. But in all honesty, good things come to those who wait, because after Dr. Hardwick starts going through John's research and stuff like that, he can't take everything that John has suffered through. So the old dipshit here ends up going batshit crazy and catches himself on fire. Then we all have a Merry Christmas. The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot isn't your typical vampire novel, and it's beautifully constructed with complex characters, curveballs, and scenery that suck me into its gothic heart. Aside from that, the themes that I noticed regards class privilege, trust issues, and if humans should be trusted with deadly weapons. Character-wise, due to how drawn out everything is and how well developed the characters are, by the time we got to the end of this book, Hanny and I felt like we could not trust anybody. And while the book stresses that you should not trust a vampire, the same can easily be said for humans. And even though some of the character development here does feel like it's really drawn out, I do think that had this been done any other way, the ending would not have been as impactful, and Hanny and I would have not felt as manipulated. Theme-wise, I've noticed where there was a lot of class privilege and expectations that were upheld in this book. Like, for starters, John created this whole backstory for his wife Camille, where people would think that she came from a privileged family such as himself. Then, after he takes her to a fancy shindig, Camille won't take crap off of one of the high society members. And because of that, Camille is expected to apologize to this person. And even though John wants to be on his wife's side, he realizes that his reputation is at stake, so he makes her apologize. And in my opinion, this really shows how high society and saving face can damage a relationship, because you're supposed to stand by your spouse, especially if it is a public display. Also, there's a moment where Dr. Hardwick explains that John's father had carefully cultivated his clients so that he only catered to those who were high society. And now the same is expected of John. which, in other words, unless you were wealthy, there was a pretty good chance you weren't going to see a well-respected doctor or a well-cultivated doctor. And truth be it, this is still something that goes on today, except it's mostly with insurance. And to be honest, if you don't have good insurance, hospital bills will eat you alive. And I know quite a few people, unfortunately, who avoid going to the doctor or avoid getting prescriptions simply because they don't have the money. Another subject that comes into play is trust issues, which this is seen by how John didn't defend his wife. And I imagine that if I had been her, then I totally would not have believed he would have stood by my side for anything from here on out, especially since this scene played out the way it did. But aside from that, there's a lot of other instances in this book because it feels like at some point every single character abuses the trust of someone else. And I wish I could elaborate a little bit more here, but if I did, I would give away some spoilers. However, just know that by the time Hanny and I finished reading this, the trust issues that we had developed upon just learning each of the characters was something where we didn't even believe at this point that the protagonist would do what was right. And last is the subject of if humans can be trusted with weapons that could cause mass destruction. Which, in this book, it does say that humans are brilliant, but at the same time, they're blind. And this kind of goes into a deeper explanation of, even though this could be used for good, exactly how long would it be before a human would mishandle this item or use it to gain dominance? Which I think this is still a subject that's relevant today, except not only does it focus on things that could possibly be created in a lab, it also regards civilians owning things like automatic weapons. The Delicate Dependency didn't creep me out or gross me out. And at first, it didn't even scare me. But the longer I sat and thought about the book's open ending and what could possibly happen, it actually became a very frightening book. The Delicate Dependency by Michael Talbot was a long and heavy read, but at the same time, it had a great payoff at the end. And even though some of this might seem to be a little too long-winded, I still really enjoyed being sucked into this gothic world. Also, since the book focuses on a deadly virus, for those who have had loved ones who have passed away from COVID, this might be a little too soon of a read. And considering that we're still in a pandemic and some of the things I've gone through are still kind of in the back of my mind, there were times that this book felt a little too real. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for a gothic horror adventure that paints vampires in a different light, then I highly recommend The Delicate Dependency. Well, now that I've finished with that review, it's time for me to thank these amazing people for contributing to my Patreon account. Here's a list of my Patreon contributors. And as you can tell, some of them are creators, so be sure to check out their work. Also, if you would like to contribute to my Patreon as well, just go to the description section of this video and you'll see that I have a link available. If you decide to contribute, I have 2 tiers available. One is for $5 a month, where you will receive a shout out at the end of my videos, such as what you see here. And if you are a creator, I will include in that shout out your creation or your profession. The second tier that I have available is for $10 a month, which I will still give you the shout out that you see at the end of my videos, but I do creepy photography on the side, so at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over one of my creepy photos. From there, you can print it off or do whatever you like. But if you're able to do this, that's awesome. If not, no sweat. I just hope you return to this channel so we can have a good time together. Also, if you would like to hit me up on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok are all available in the description section of this episode. Also, I recently included a link to my Amazon wish list, so if anyone wants to spoil me, be my guest, the link is there. And pretty much until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.